Zoom.
I just thought, sorry, just to interrupt you slightly. I just thought
No,
I'd
no,
record this meeting. I hope that's okay. We do need people's permission for that. So
no, no, that's fine. No, that's fine.
just in case, we might have some because I obviously other colleagues and things who maybe can't attend. So that would
No,
be
no,
the
no.
only reason I would do that. Share it, yeah.
That's absolutely fine. Then maybe, if we miss him, I don't know where he is, but
Mhm.
if we do miss him, then at least, you can send him a recording. So,
Yeah.
from where I'm sitting in South Africa, we have major influence with our neighboring countries, and we have a very big push with this Sector 39 design permaculture academies. We had a university this morning in Pretoria that pitched a proposal to us to open up a third permaculture academy in South Africa. And coming from a university, that's massively beneficial because you're sitting with big numbers. You're sitting with 2,000, 3,000 students
Mm.
and their parents and kind of, blah, 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 long story short. So education also in general is a big part for me of what we're doing with permaculture going forth.
Sure.
And if I look at what's going on the planet at the moment, this is probably the best time ever to put a lot of energy into developing these academies. So this is why I did the mail introduction between you and Craig.
Yeah.
And I think once you've seen their website, you kind of share my sentiments a little bit. Because they need someone like you, and for you to get involved with them, it would just do so much for your footprint and all
Yeah.
the work that you do. I mean, so again, from my perspective, the biggest advantage that comes from you is the fact that you can offer an online education platform.
Hmm.
And they don't have that.
Right.
So this is the primary reason why I wanted you to meet them. I think it's a wonderful partnership between Sector 39 and
Mhm.
Foundations for Farming. And then for us, I'm always wanting to refer to us or myself as the end user, because if we have Sector 39 and we have Foundations for Farming, I mean, it's gonna just enhance or propel our intentions to open up more of these academies, because we can literally go to the farms where they work
Mm.
and say, if you have the infrastructure or if you have the willingness, we can open an academy on your land or
Mm.
in your facility or whatever the case may be. Because what happens then is that the offer then starts going from kind of, A to Z, because at the moment, it seems like their focus is more on the conservation of soil.
Mm.
I think if they get involved with the bigger picture in terms of what permaculture can offer them, ultimately they'd be able to offer just so much more to these people that they're helping. So I think if we do miss him, I see he still hasn't joined, and we're not that early. Then you might want to share the recording with him.
Sure.
And my only
Let,
intention.
shall I share a few of my thoughts and just to sort of clarify
Yes,
about
please, yes.
the Sector 39 experience as well, because we're very different types of entities and organizations coming together here. So um yeah, I don't know. So but when you're ready or when you think
No, no,
I
go
could
for it.
chat about that a bit, and obviously that proposal. I just thought I'd try to jot down a few things to help just clarify what we're talking about, and again make sure we're on the same page, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which I think we are.
Yeah. I replied to that mail this morning, and we're definitely on the same page with that.
I mean, the way that I sort of think, perhaps what Sector 39 can offer is we could really be the spark that could set something in motion, and I think
Yes.
that's sort of what our mission statement is as an entity. Is when I kind of first started using the Sector 39 name and thinking about that, it was about bringing permaculture into new areas and to bring it into contact with new people, so not just to stay in our comfort zone and talk to, the home team, as it were. So I've constantly been pushing to break into new areas. Very early on, let's say when I first started teaching, because I'd been, involved in various permaculture projects and worked in the environment sort of business. Craig is here.
Oh, has he joined us?
Yeah.
Ah, okay, great. Okay. Hi, Craig. Can you hear us?
I think we just give him a moment to
Okay.
connect.
Okay, great. I'm not sure where he is. I think he's in Harare.
Oh, okay. We've got a connection. Aha. He's there, but muted. Greetings, Craig. Aha.
Morning, guys. Afternoon.
Greetings.
Hello, Craig. Thanks for joining.
Yes. Sorry, I thought it was my calendar. It reflected at 1 o'clock my time.
Aha.
So I didn't
No,
realize.
it's 1 o'clock UK time, 2 o'clock South Africa. Are you in Harare, Craig?
I'm in Harare, yeah.
Oh, okay. So then you would be the same as South African time. Yeah, okay.
Correct, yes, yeah.
Okay, well, great to meet you, and thanks for the time to join in.
Yes, thank you.
Steve was just busy talking, but I think, Steve, if I can just kind of press pause for a moment and
sure.
just...
And if I could just say one thing, Craig, I just started to record this meeting just in case anything useful came up to share with colleagues. I hope you're okay with that. And the purpose of just sharing with, our own team.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Craig, anyway, so what I was saying to Steve just before you joined, and then I'm going to give Steve the opportunity just to talk from his perspective. So what I read from your mails is that your primary focus is on agricultural conservation.
Correct, yeah.
Yes. So when it comes to agricultural conservation, that forms kind of an integral part of what we do in permaculture. Permaculture is it's more an umbrella term, and within the permaculture kind of discipline sits agricultural conversation. I keep getting confused. Conservation. So that's one thing that we put a lot of energy into it. In our world, we take the word agricultural conservation and we kind of take it more down to something called soil husbandry. Because everything in permaculture and everything in your world starts with healthy soil and good soils and proper composting and mulching and so on and so on. And this is why when I made contact with your people and while I was talking to Steve, I could just see the synergy between, kind of putting heads together. That was the one reason, because what you're doing is a very, very, very important part in permaculture. And then the second reason why I wanted you and Steve to meet is because you both have a really large kind of global footprint, and you have footprint in some of the same countries. So from our perspective, for the lack of a better word, calling it an end user, as someone who wants to start up permaculture academies, we kind of very dependent on someone like Foundations for Farming, and we're very dependent on someone like Sector 39, because we need the land to train people, to uplift communities, to do something about poverty. And then Steve and them provides us the education, the backup, the support, the mentorship. And the reason why I wanted the two of you to meet is just to kind of maybe assess the possibilities for collaboration between your two organizations, because it would make it a lot easier for people like us to establish permaculture academies if we have both of you as strategic partners. But let me stop there, because that was the main reason why I wanted you and Steve to meet each other.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, it sort of falls under that, the new buzzword seems to be regenerative agriculture, doesn't it?
Yes.
So that seems to be the new world buzzword, with climate smart agriculture. Seems to change every 5 minutes depending on what the United Nations is thinking. But Yeah, so I think permaculture falls under that, and we would as well. So yeah, there obviously are big synergies in what we both teach, although the details might not be the same, but the overall target at the end is the same.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we've taken agricultural conservation, and we've taken regenerative farming, and we've kind of I don't want to say rebrand, because then we're all going to get confused and so on and so on. But we use the word soil husbandry because we try and educate from junior primary school to senior high school to university level, to private sector level, to private farmers, to an uneducated community. So we try and educate as big a community as possible. And we've found that the word soil husbandry, when you talk to people about regenerative farming, a lot of people do not really understand what that term means. Or if you talk about agricultural conservation, especially your more uneducated communities, they don't really know what that means. So we found that using the word soil husbandry makes them understand that you have to be very careful and very specifically orientated with the way that you treat soil, because that's the logical starting point of what we're all doing. If we have healthy soil and well-nourished soil, we can literally do anything. So, in that sense, we're all exactly like you say, we're all aiming for exactly the same outcome, same target, same everything. But Steve, yeah, you were busy starting to talk just before Craig arrived. I think you should actually continue with what you were wanting to say.
Okay, thank you, Dereck. Yeah, I was going to just sort of map out a bit more clearly about perhaps where Sector 39 has come from and where we're at, and what we're trying to achieve and so forth. So I hope that's sort of helpful to find how we can get a mix of services. So essentially, I'm a teacher. Wally and Steve, and I did a degree in sustainable development many years ago in Reading, in UK, and I saw basically it's a hybrid of ecology and economics. That was kind of like my degree, and then I trained as a teacher in economics and business studies. I went off traveling, and I went to Zimbabwe of all places many years ago, and in the early 90s. And I came across Fambids and I, and permaculture education and projects especially in eastern Zimbabwe, in the highlands there, in around Chimanimani district. And I was very inspired by that. So early 90s. Came back to UK and relocated to Wales, which is the greener and more affordable part of the UK to live in. But also interestingly, so Wales has its own government. We have our own Welsh Assembly, and within that they have the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is one of the reasons why I live in Wales. So they're the only or the first national government to look at all development policy through the framework of how it will impact on future generations. And that breaks down into an understanding of 7 different areas of social economy and what have you. And one of those 7 goals is about Wales within its global relationships. And so within that, there is a Wales for Africa kind of program. I've always, because I originally was trained and experienced permaculture in Zimbabwe, I've always kind of, been open to the possibility of reconnecting to Africa and, closing that circle, if you like. So I worked at the Centre for Alternative Technology, which is in a place called Machynlleth in Paris in Wales. And it was really the world's first eco-centre, environments, and again, a demonstration centre. So not just giving people words, but actually living within the ethos. What is it like to disconnect from the grid, to treat your own water, generate your own power, and then to build a living, breathing community around that then can communicate those ideas. So I became membership coordinator at the Centre for Alternative Technology and helped, do conferences and magazines and newsletters and that kind of stuff. So I became very familiar with communicating ideas around this broader idea of sustainability, the journey that we need to make, you know, to get into this direction. When I left there after 7 years, kind of looking for the next challenge, and actually having worked for networks and organizations, I sort of wanted to get back to doing project work. And I reconnected with some people back in Reading at an address which is 39 London Street, which is part of where the name Sector 39 comes from. And we put, I was part of a project which we designed and built a forest garden and put it on the roof of a community and education centre on London Street, right in the middle of Reading. And we put 176 species of medicinal, edible, herbal plants on there that represented the sort of, you know, where our food and our medicine, what have you, comes from globally. Again, it was an educational project about our relationship through plants to the environment and food security. And after that finished, which was 2005, that was when I first started trading then as Sector 39. People started coming to me and saying, tell me more about this permaculture thing. Can you educate me? How does it, you know, what are the components? So actually, within that, I've actually been very engaged in the social housing side of that, about housing cooperatives. And I've had 25 years involved in housing cooperatives and thinking about how people can take a greater degree of control over their lives, be more empowered, so they can then start making decisions which, you know, affect the outside world. So that's sort of how that came about. So then started teaching the PDC, Permaculture Design course. It's a 12-day course that follows a set curriculum that brings people into the mindset of permaculture, which it's a way of thinking. Permaculture is a design framework. It's a way of making decisions, allocating resources, building consensus with other people so that your long-term objectives are aligned with each other. So it's essentially a consensus building tool. Yes, we can agree about how important soils are. What else can we agree about? How else can we build that into a way of, if you like, planning and decision making? So it's a coordinating construct. And I think that's a lot of its real power comes from that. So I taught lots of PDCs in the UK, some in Portugal, some in, you know, where else otherwise. And then I think 2011, I hosted a visit through the Wales for Africa program of 6 Ugandan project leaders from a place called Kamuli in the Eastern District. And they came to Wales for, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And I was then working in community gardening and, you know, growing food in public spaces, growing food on land that nobody individually owns, and I hosted a visit for these 6 Ugandans, showed them around a bit, and really connected with 2 or 3 of them. I mean, really deep, strong connection. And of course, they invited me to come visit them. 2014 that was, and so in 2016 we started. I came away thinking, there's some very interesting things happening here. I really like Uganda. I like these people. I would love to contribute. I don't really know what I can do. The only thing I know what to do is how to teach a PDC. And then I had the idea, aha, I might come back to Uganda and teach a PDC, see what happens. So that's what we did. That was 2016. And I had contacts through this organization, the Wales for Africa Link organization. So we pulled in people from that network who were regional to Kamuli. But I also put it on Facebook. And not really knowing what to expect. And I connected with all sorts of random people through Facebook. People and Kenya and Uganda mainly. So that was 2016, our first training course. And then we came back in 2017, did the same. And based on that experience, we managed to get a bit of funding from the Wales for Africa program to come back in 2017 and 2018 and to do it properly, if you like, to build on that learning experience. And yeah, just exactly that. Hi there, welcome.
I got my video sorted out.
Okay. Right. So then that sort of led to having done 2 or 3 courses there. And what quickly happened was it became a network. And people had been on the first course, wanted to come back, and people had been on the second course, wanted to meet the people on the first course. And using social media, that all very, very quickly, developed and grew. In 2018, we won a 6-month contract to deliver training in Bidi refugee settlement in northern Uganda for South Sudanese displaced people. And interesting, that came through connections, because it turns out that the person who's responsible for the Norwegian Refugee Council program actually had done our PDC 10 years previously. So it's sort of another way in which this network had worked. I just cut all that story short. So that's sort of how it all got going. So now what's happened is all sorts of satellite projects have kicked off. And I managed to get a little bit of follow-up funding to support nodes of growth. One in Kenya, one in Uganda, one in Rwanda. And I've worked through people who I know are effective communicators and good, who are working through strengths. It also struck me is that the people that we'd met and connected with through the PDC process, if I'd had to go and find them through a recruitment agency or something like that, I could have spent thousands and not met people of the caliber that I've met, because the ones that have come into the network are the ones who are really self-motivated and, and have a lot to offer. So, in Paul Agola, one of our sort of network members, he started his own. When he got back to his village in 2016 after doing his first training, everybody wanted to know what he'd been doing and what he'd been learning about. And he said he didn't really know how to explain it, because he was still learning himself. So after a few days reflection, he realized he was going to start his own training center. And I think this is also where the germ of this idea came across, is once you see permaculture, you don't really need to have it to explain to you. It instantly makes sense. And it's like, it's no more remarkable than saying water flows downhill. It's sort of like, working with the natural energy and flow of nature. So through that, then having these demonstration centers, to say, which we've got 3 at the moment, we've been able to then use them as either for people to come in, have visits, become inspired, and then follow them and do training with them in their own communities, or obviously use the hubs as training centers themselves. One of the things that's really struck me since working in Africa and working with people of all different backgrounds and abilities and literacy and what have you, especially the experience actually in the refugee settlements, it's made me really think about how can you communicate a permaculture in a way in which it's accessible to everyone. We want to reach everybody here, potentially. And so, yes, we can go down a very academic route and understand it in a complex way, but also we can go down really, because permaculture is a language about patterns. And one of the things that we say is we teach from patterns to detail. The world's so complex, it's very hard to make sense of it, or it's very easy to get lost in the detail. But if you can take some steps back and see the overarching patterns, then you start to get an empathy for it, and then you can actually problem solve yourself through trial and error. The other thing that sets permaculture slightly apart from any other sort of system that I'm aware of is it has ethics at its heart. It has this 3 core ethics at its heart. And the further I get into teaching this, the more I realize is that's what it begins with. It begins with this idea. And so at the whole, and here's one way I try to explain it. Out of everything in the world out there, what is the most interesting thing, the most important thing to you? It's you. It's yourself. And that's not selfish. We all need to breathe. We all need to eat. We all need some clothes and some footwear, or whatever it is that we feel that we need. These are essential items. And if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are certain things. If you're cold and tired and frightened and hungry and naked, you're not thinking about helping other people. You're thinking about helping yourself. So that permaculture begins from that point of view. So everybody should be interested in it, because it's about how you meet your needs. That's why I try to sell it to people. But, and there's a but, and this is the most radical thing that's within permaculture, and blows the doors off. It's so radical. It puts out the idea that there's such a thing as enough. So in our, consumerist world, we're told that more is always better. Well, what we're saying is, okay, look, You know, another story which I use, another way I use of explaining it is, you know, when if you're on a jet plane, they give you that little safety talk at the beginning. In the unlikely event of the cabin depressurizing, an oxygen mask will descend in front of your face. Put yours on first. Don't try and help your kids, the old lady behind you, because if you go blue in the face and pass out, now we've got to save you too. So sort yourself out, and then you only need 2 masks, you only need 1. Once you've got yourself sorted, you can help everybody else around you. So permaculture begins by this idea of putting yourself first, but setting limits to your own consumption. And what we say is you have to have a surplus left for reinvestment. And by surplus, that could, it might be money, it might be time, it might be some land, it might be some beans, whatever it is that you have left over that you didn't need. And you can build community with that. You can trade those with your neighbors, you can invest them, you can give them away, you can use it as a tool. So we create change in the world by investing surplus strategically in the people around us. Spare time, spare resources, money, whatever. And that then brings you into the second ethic, which is about called people care. Yesterday I was on a safeguarding training session, and I thought how much that fits into it. The people within our charge, we need to know that they're being safe, not being harassed or bullied or something like that. Well, imagine then how the second ethic works out about how we relate to other people, and understanding that positive, strategic human relations are beneficial to everybody. I can be only motivated by selfish reasons, but it's still in my interest to build a strong relationship with people around me. The third ethics flows from the fact and the recognition that we're all simply a part of a huge, living, breathing, interconnected ecosystem. It's called planet Earth, or the biosphere, however you want to, Gaia, as James Lovelock famously called it. But however you want to see it is, we're only a part of it. And so everything that we have to do, everything we do has to speak to the fact that we're a subset of something bigger. And of course, and then I teach people is that the only new energy that's coming into this system, planetary system, the only new energy coming from the sun. Now, we can sit in the sun and get nice and warm and get suntan, but it doesn't feed us. Only plants can translate solar energy into sugars and starches, carbohydrates. So everything on Earth exists by building a relationship to plants. So it turns out that soil is fantastically important, because that's the medium in which dead things become alive again. That's where we complete the cycle. So permaculture has these 3 ethics. They're quite easy to communicate. They're easy to remember. We say fair share, people care, earth care. That's the way of remembering it. But it's just but then hopefully that's brought people on board, because this is about you. This isn't about saving the planet or worrying about poor people. It's about empowering ourselves so we can become more effective, and then building relationships, from that. So a lot of the permaculture skills fit around, firstly, about thinking about how we meet our needs, secondly, about how we build relationships with other people, and then understanding our relationships as living natural world. And then there's 12 principles. Now, again, different people teach this differently. So there's not like this is not permaculture, but this is a way of remembering it, a way of thinking about it. So one of the authors, a guy called David Holmgren, wrote a book called Principles and Pathways Beyond Sustainability. And in it, he gave us 12 permaculture principles. And they have a sequence, they have an order. And a bit like the hours of the clock, 12 goes to 1, and they carry on. It's cyclical, it never ends. So once you become involved in permaculture, it never ends. It's ongoing, and you just get more, experience as you move on. So that's become how I teach it. And it's almost like it's just like a narrative arc that helps string together all these various different ideas, which include all of the things that both of you guys are interested in, and all of the objectives: food security or soil stability, enhancing and repairing natural systems, ecosystems, valuing diversity, valuing human diversity. All of those things sit within those principles. But again, it makes it a way in which you can teach it in an episodic way. So we could do 12 days, a principle each day, or we could do 1 day a week, or 1 day a month, or however we might want to do it. And since the pandemic has happened, and all of my plans to be toing and froing to Rwanda and Kenya and what have you have been paused, I've started teaching more and more online. But then finding out ways, because again, a lot of rural African partners can't necessarily access YouTube. They don't have good enough data connection, or things like that. So a lot of the educational platforms are too, shall we say, too bandwidth heavy, or they can be. That's a major consideration, major limitation. But I found I can send people snippets on over social media. I started using an application called Signal. It's a bit like WhatsApp, but it's free, and it's not. It's more, it's more. It's safer, more private. So we've got huge amounts of resources. We've got huge amounts of examples. We've got living, ongoing examples. We've got things that we've archived. We've got a network of people that we've trained, or literally all over East Africa, but also, spread all over the world as well, that we could draw on. So I'm starting to think that, yes, we could teach a really good course remotely. We've got the, say we have the resources and what have you. We could meet the challenges of limited connectivity. As long as we've got something, we can work with that. Obviously, if it's a good connection, it's easier, and we can do videos and stuff. But I'm learning that we can do it without that. And what you need is a connection in the place where you're teaching, who's going to be your in-field lead operative, or coordinating tutor or whatever. And again, so it's like, say, someone like Ali Tebendeki, if I was working with him, if he was in situ, he's been through the course curriculum with me 2 or 3 times already. He's very active. He has his own experience. So you can imagine how you could coordinate. So obviously then, from these principles and theories, then from that flow, the practicals, the actual things that you're doing, making compost heaps and forming the land so it receives rainwater and holds it, and all of those things. But rather than permaculture being a set of techniques, it's the thinking and the rationale that gives you those techniques. So it's not raised beds and compost heaps. It's the why you need raised beds and compost heaps. It's why soil is so important, and how you build a relationship to the living sort of fabric of the world. That's sort of the nuts and bolts behind it. So I see it as like an operating system. And also, I mean, just to say, I'll stop in a minute. So the other thing that we've really been thinking a lot through this academy framework is the idea of peer-to-peer training and mentoring. So if I train someone, that makes them a tier 1 trainee, and I'm getting echo from your one microphone, Dereck. I think you're up twice there. So hang on, I can mute it from here, I think. Can I? Oh, there we go. There we go. That's fine. That's better. So we ran a course remotely in about August, September last year in a place called Kumi in Uganda. And then the course was shortened because of COVID restrictions. So instead, we invested some of the resources into going out and meeting people and supporting them in their homesteads, in their villages. And what we found was, some of the people who'd done the course hadn't activated it, and they were just still thinking about it. Others had started doing it, and then their neighbors had said, "What is this? You're doing it differently," asking for explanations. So suddenly they became a focus of attention. So then they created tier 2 and even tier 3 trainees who've copied the ideas. And then what we found is that by doing follow-up support visits, that really, really, really amplifies that impact. And if you go back some months later and hand out seeds and hoes, or forks or whatever, basic tools, again, that really reinforces that set of behaviors. So I have got some fantastic interviews and follow-up they've been able to do to see how that has, how it's rolled out. It's seriously changed people's life quality, just having 12 days training. And people are talking about, well, before we only used to eat once a day, now we eat 3 times a day, maybe 4. One woman says, well, my kids used to get sick all the time, and now they don't. So they're eating green veg. They're eating more than posho, So that, there you go. So and then Ali Tebendeki, who's our mutual friend, who's the connection between myself and Dereck, he's just an example, really, of someone who's come out of our academy network. He's a natural leader. He's like an ambassador, really. And he was keen to go to South Africa. We helped him with some of his travel costs, and then he's just gone out and networked, joined the dots, and here we are now, you know, sometime later, talking like this. So to me, that peer-to-peer mentoring thing, it works. And to take very complicated ideas, but to simmer them down into, into components which are easily memorable, that works as well. And whether some people do just understand it through the techniques, that's fine. But anyway, I'll stop there. We just had a 10-minute warning, but we can reconvene another meeting if we want to. Anyway, I hope that's useful, and that's just my little story.
Thank you very much, Steve. Yeah. I just want to say one thing to Craig. So this Ali person that Steve refers to, he goes between Uganda, Rwanda, Zambia. He's a go-between for a few countries, and he actually helps on behalf of Sector 39 to launch and open academies. And the last time I spoke to him, he was in the process of opening one in Zimbabwe, which I don't think has been done yet. But this offers us a really good opportunity for Ali to connect to Craig. And let Ali do his thing and let him open his academy, but then Craig and them can follow Ali in terms of how he does this. And by doing that, there can be a value share from Ali to Craig, and then that way Craig can see how all of this fits together to open up and launch an academy of this type. And I think, once Craig's gone with Ali through a process of opening up an academy somewhere, that would kind of be the magic in terms of, opening other academies in the countries where Craig and them have presence. So I think an introduction, so the introduction between Steve and Craig has its own value in terms of strategy and going forth. But I think after this email, my specific takeaway would be to introduce Ali to Craig and say, please continue with your efforts in Zimbabwe, but include Craig as you go along, because that's, I think, on a practical level where we can link up in terms of collaborating.
And one of the things that we're kind of seeing and thinking about is what we're calling an academy, each one would be kind of unique, because the place itself would be unique. They'd have different set of opportunities. Are they wet? Are they dry? Are they hot? Are they cold? What are the soils like? Are they interested in animals or plants or fish or whatever? There might be urban, there might be rural, there might be urban fringe. So there's lots of different. So each one, and again, the idea that we have, and we want to push forward, is that we would work with the key stakeholders and the first generation students to actually design what that, firstly, the academy and its first steps, what they might be, and going into it with the assumption is that we don't know, because each set of people have different priorities, they have different challenges, so each one has got to speak to the uniqueness of its situation, which is how it is in nature. Nothing's the same, and no two spider webs are ever the same. So I think that's sort of what we're offering as well. It's not just a one size fits all thing, but we work very closely, and in the process actually train the stakeholders and the students as much as we can, so that we've got the same language, what these same concepts, these ethics and principles. They're very tradable, they travel well, and then we've then got a conceptual language which you can then use that to drill down to the detail, which is always going to be specific to the place.
Craig, so just something from you. Does it make sense what we're trying to say?
Yes, I just love your passion. And the way you articulated there, Steve. Thank you so much. It's a real privilege to meet you. Just for your info, I was a commercial farmer in Zimbabwe for 30 years and doing all the wrong things. I grew citrus and mangoes and passion fruit and had lots of cattle and maize, and so. But I was a really quite a big commercial outfit, and you might or might not know, we all got thrown off our farms in the early 2000s without any compensation. But that put me in a crossroads place where we had to make a choice to fight, to flee, or to forgive and stay where I was. And 3 or 4 of my friends decided to fight, and they got killed for it. And majority of my friends left the country, but we just reckoned that if you're going to harbor your bitterness and angst, and there's no country in the world far enough away, actually, because it goes with you. So we decided the hardest thing was to forgive. And from the get-go, you've probably understood that we, as Foundations for Farming, come from a totally Christian background. We used to be called Farming God's Way, because exactly as you're saying, Steve, our founder, Brian Oldry, who became the second largest privately owned farm in the whole of Africa at one stage, just went with a childlike type faith and went into the bush and just asked, and just saw what nature's like and what creation is like. And it was very simple to begin with. And as you say, the simplicity, the problem with us is we tend to try and make things complicated. We overcomplicate things, and yet it's in front of our eyes, the way things happen in nature. And so the first 2 things he saw were just initially, firstly, there's no inversion tillage in nature. That's number one. Plowing is totally, there's no scientific reason ever to plow. We all know that.
Yep.
And then the second thing was the beautiful mulch cover that covers the forest floor. So he went and back in just with those 2 principles, went back to his farm and started with 2 hectares and ended up 3,500 hectares. This way of farming, totally. All we realized at the end of the day, to get anything to grow, all you need is seed to soil contact and rain, and it grows again. And so with that simplicity, we started to teach small scale and try to disrupt rural poverty this way by just getting them out of dependency and getting them a system which is cheaper and it works and can bring them into profit, because you've got your end game has obviously got to be profitability, because if you're not making a profit on your farm or in your whatever you're doing and whatever your endeavor is, if you're not making a profit, there's only two avenues to survival, and that you'll either beg or you'll steal. And that's the problem that's happening, is Africa's become a begging bowl, and yet we've got 30% of the world's natural resources and only 3% of the world's GDP. So it's a travesty, and it's because, so that's where we come from. And then to this simple technology, we have a very simple implementation management system that goes along with it, because we distill everything down to the grandmother in the village. She doesn't want to know about cation exchange and pHs and all that. She wants to know how to feed her family. So we distill everything down to that level. And so then we give her a management system based on doing things on time to a very high standard.
Sorry, I think we're going to disconnect. Will we reconnect after the session expires?
I'll just send you a new link straight away. And
okay, so if it goes away, we can reconnect. Okay.
Yeah, just to warn you, you got a minute or something like that. But yeah.
Thanks, Craig.
And so we've got a management system based on doing things on time to a very high standard without wastage, which brings you joy, which brings you the work ethic, the desire to work hard. Yeah. And so those are very simple, and they apply to all walks of life, whether you're a farmer, a teacher, a doctor, or whatever. And so that's the simplicity of that. But what I liked about what you were saying is that the person has to, it's so holistic that it's got to be a lifestyle change. It's not just a methodology or a technology, because that's been tried by the world for 50 years in Africa and it hasn't worked. People have got poorer. And you can chuck money at Africa and it's not going to get better. It's all about changing we say you cannot change the heart, change of behavior in a village until you've changed his heart. And that's where our speciality is. We go towards changing the person, and then agriculture is very easy. Then the principles that we want to instill, once we've changed the person, otherwise they look at us with great suspicion. And, you're coming along and they're asking you, what are you going to give them? You know, that's the old typical NGO way of doing things. Give them what you think they need without even asking them what they need. And so that's the tragedy of Africa. And so